for Spring Hack and Learn Show and Tell. So at the end of these 2 weeks of experimenting and playing with the challenge, it's hosted at the Government Outcomes Lab in collaboration with our partners Insper Matrices in São Paulo, Brazil, and the South African Medical Research Council. Before we get started, as you might have heard, the session is being recorded and we will make it available for those who were not able to join as part of our Hack and Learn material. I welcome everybody once again. I'm Mara Roldi. I'm the academic co-director at the Government Outcomes Lab here in Oxford. And we've been hosting the Hack and Learn for several years now for data enthusiasts who are really dying to use outcome to create better outcomes. And so thank you for those of you who participated to this latest challenge. In this call today, we have you who participated, and we also have James and Nilima, whom you met and helped us during the challenge. They come from Open Data Services. For those of you for whom it's the first time, the show and tell is the session where we present what we've been doing in the past 2 weeks. And today we have a great guest that will give feedback on our presenter is Professor Rob Proctor. Rob Proctor is a visiting professor here at the Blavatsky School of Government, but is a professor of social informatics and the deputy head in the Department of Computer Science at Warwick University at the Alan Turing Institute. We've been collaborating with Rob on a number of projects involving machine learning and artificial intelligence. So a great privilege to have you here, Rob. Do you want to say hello to the team, Rob, so they will see your face and attach a name?
Sure. Thanks for the introduction, Mara. I'm very pleased to be here and looking forward to what I think will be a very interesting event.
Thank you, Rob. And now all of you, I think you have the camera on. Please do keep the camera on. We are a very friendly bunch and we like to see each other. And if you can, please make sure there is your name and surname on your Zoom profile. We will call you in to participate as the session goes along. The agenda for today is that we will do a summary of the challenge, and then we will look at what has been achieved, and we will have feedback from Rob, and we'll open it up to Q&A from the audience. Feel free to put comments in the chat as we go along. As I said, it's very informal, so we will keep it very friendly. And we hope it has been a good session for you. And let's see where we take this. So I'll stop here. Just I want to warn you, at the end of this session, we have a tradition of having a Hack and Learn social. And so at the end of the session, we meet for some online crazy social things where we wear or we bring something that is that embodies the Indigo spirit. So Shri will say something more about this at the end of the Hack and Learn. But I'll stop here. I'll go to Huli that will give us a summary of what was this challenge about.
Thank you, Mara. Before going to the challenge, for those who are joining for the first time, I want to say that this is our formal show and tell session. This is the session where we discussed what we learned and the new insights that we created in these past 2 weeks. This event started on the 7th of March, and then we have been using Slack channels to communicate between all of us because we are all based in very different parts of the world. If we go to this next slide, I just wanted to share some of our Slack chats where we did all our work and where we were exchanging different resources and different data sources, and we all experimented with ChatGPT this time, and this is where we share our findings. If we go to the next slide, I can start describing our challenge. When we were doing our kickoff session, I described what was the main aim of this Hack and Learn. And I started describing the manual process that we usually do, to include new data in the impact bond data set. And I told everyone that the process is very manual and it could happen in 2 different ways. Sometimes organizations share data with us. These are organizations working on impact bond projects, and they basically communicate with us via email, or it could be an in-person conversation, and they have some new data that they want to share, and the data analysts and the data stewards upload that data manually to our database. Some other times, the data stewards and the data analysts are constantly looking for reports, press releases, interim reports, and other type of documents that are describing impact bonds. And we basically read these reports, we extract the data that we're interested in, and we upload the data. So basically what I wanted to share with you is that at the moment, this process is very, very manual. And what we were trying to do is to test if we could use ChatGPT or any other type of artificial intelligence tool to speed up the process and to come up with a process that maybe it's not 100% automatic, but something that could be maybe half human and half artificial intelligence to make it easier and to make it faster. What we are doing now is to share what we learned in these past 2 weeks of experimentation. If we go to the next slide, I will leave the floor to group number 1. Group number 1 is the group that tested data structure and data accuracy with ChatGPT, and this is led by Madhu and Mattheus, so I will leave the floor to them.
Thanks, Holly. Madhu, do I go first or you?
Go
I
on,
can start?
Mattheus.
Okay. So our challenge was basically trying to replicate what we do when we get data from reports and from documents of different types to populate the Indigo data on the database. So the challenge was first try and see what we can get from ChatGPT in terms of information from those reports, but also it had another part related to checking if the information is correct and checking how much completeness do we have in the database. Can you pass the slide, please? So experimenting a data extraction pilot to test if ChatGPT could read long reports and complete the gigantic Indigo database. Can you pass, please? So what we did was to get those reports, first with some reports we had already read, we had already got the data from, and check what kind of variables could we get from it to complete the spreadsheets. There are templates for inputting the Indigo database. Some reports that we used were the Peterborough report. That was the first social impact bond, and also these ESSEX multi-systematic therapy social impact bonds. Those are 2 reports that we considered, one to be very complete and full of information on the internet, and the other to be more the average type of report that we have to extract data from. Madhu, do you want to take from here?
Hi, yes. So with all of this, I also want to bring in Lavanya because I'm aware that Lavanya was keen on sharing her inputs of how we performed the data extraction exercise and what were the things that we did. So we get a good overview of the process. Lavanya, do you want to jump in?
Yes, thank you, Madhu and Mattheus. So yeah, we were experimenting with different data reports. I also looked at the wildlife one, which had very little data, but that seemed to make it easier for ChatGPT to analyze it. I was on GPT 3.5, so I couldn't upload PDFs. So what I did was copy individual tabs in. But I think that makes it really hard to analyze relational databases. And I noticed when we put in the information after a while, and somebody else also noticed this, I think it was Pragati and someone else, they noticed that it kind of, from earlier on, if you have a lot of different inputs, and then we found out about the token limit on ChatGPT 3.5. It's got like 4,000 token limits. Some of the other things we noticed as well was it's tough to get it to automatically draw insights from a chunk of raw data. So you felt like you really have to walk it step by step. It's like holding a child's hand and walking it through the process. Look at this row, look at this row. Can you read the data? Can you read the data? The good thing was that ChatGPT would tell me like if the data was missing or not there and if there was nothing to look at. But in terms of like finding correlations straight away, it was quite hard to get it to do that. And I think maybe it would be easier to do it on Excel even. The upsides were that it was a great place to kind of brainstorm or to think about drawing what kind of insights between different variables it could, based on its previous information or from wherever it trawls the internet, it knows the possible relationships that can come between several variable headings. So then that gives you a place to start off if you're working on Excel or something, I think. And then you can do this normal calculations like mean, mode, median, and it makes life easier for you in that way. So in that sense, it was useful. Yeah. Next slide. I think that's all for section 1. Yeah.
Thank
Thanks,
you so much.
Matthew.
Thank you so much. So what Lavanya just now shared, or what we heard just now, was Lavanya's insights from the entire group 1 exercise. Not to mention that the group 1 exercise was like a combination of 2 puzzle pieces. The first one was task 1, where we were checking the data extraction exercise. And the second one was where we were seeing if the extracted data was complete and accurate, so as to measure the quality of the data that ChatGPT could generate. What we were trying to do is use reports in the first instance, upload it, and then see if it could like auto-populate some of the variables on the Indigo spreadsheet. We tried different approaches. So some of us worked on 3.5, some of us worked on version 4, some of us took different very report and data rich projects, and some of us worked on projects which had scarcity of resource. We tried to look at quantitative variables, but also descriptive variables, tried to sort of figure out what works well, how much can ChatGPT push its limits. And this is where we started with the task 2 in group 1, which was to check the accuracy and completeness. Thanks to Shirley, Pragati, Rafaela, Lavanya, and everybody else who was involved in the exercise, we tried to sort of get or extract some variables and then went ahead with checking them and comparing them with the variables that we had sort of manually recorded to see if the quantitative variables were accurate, and also to see if ChatGPT sort of introduced a tone when it was trying to get the descriptive variables. So these were all the things that we tried to do and sort of scrap the surface out and see what we could get out of ChatGPT before we went into the automation process, which is the next task. But I've sort of summed up task 2. If we want to go to the next slide and see if I missed something. Yeah, these were a few questions that we kept in mind when we were looking at the accuracy and completeness. So, well, when we did the exercise for data extraction, we felt, yeah, somewhat we could get some data, not everything, because the financial data was something that was really tricky to obtain just from the reports. It was a lot of back and forth that we did to get the metrics right, to get the payments right. So ChatGPT does it, but how much is still something that we need to think together. But we also thought, well, if it does all of it, is there any further need of people like me and Juliana? Is it going to replace us completely? I think that's a long, far-fetched dream. We still have to wait to get there because ChatGPT does need a lot of hand-holding to get the accurate data. And more so because it's not specifically trained on the social impact bonds and outcome-based data sets. So there's a lot of preemption that you have to do before you ask it to extract things. So a few things like providing glossary, definitions of variables, etc., helped us like get more accuracy in the data that we were scraping out using the reports. And finally, like I said, we did a bit of work around understanding if the tone remained neutral. Say if ChatGPT was told to define an intervention description, did it still keep it neutral, or did it add certain biases in the description, made the tone, well, negative or positive? So these were a few things that we worked on in task 1. And if we can go to the next slide, these were our learnings from the tasks. Matthias, do you want to take one bit of it and I can take the other?
Sure. Thanks, Madhu. I think it's funny how we were discussing what have we learned, and I at first I think we get a little disappointed with the the super expectation of having the robot just doing everything. But when we started registering and talking to people about what have we learned from the challenges, we discovered that we learned quite a lot, because I think learning shortcomings, difficulties, challenges is also learning, and we have learned a lot of ways we have to work with ChatGPT to have better results and to have it doing more what we intended at the start. So first learning that ChatGPT could speedily retrieve certain details with accuracy, especially the quantitative variables. The second was that ChatGPT is not specifically attuned to the intricate details of Indigo outcome-based contracting data. So something that happens with those large language models is that they are trained in huge sets of data, and they are kind of they kind of regress everything to the mean. So ChatGPT is very good to create a kind of a standard English essay, but if you go to a specific subject, and that's what we are dealing with here, it needs more fine-tuning to get the right words and the right type of, I don't know if we could use that word here, but reasoning around it. Another one is that preemptive contextualization and strategic prompt generation foster robust results. So if we fine-tune what we are asking, and if we provide it with information around what we are working with, these results are better. Madhu, do you want to take it from here, or should I finish task 1 and you get task 2?
Yeah, do you want to go ahead and finish task 1,
Okay.
and then I can go for the task?
Thanks. So something else is that ChatGPT struggles handling segmented information and has limited tokens, making data extraction. So what does that mean is that the ChatGPT is structured and programmed to have a short limits on what it can get in terms of extension and time of processing, because it's like millions of people trying to access it in the server. So even OpenAI and Microsoft, being huge companies, they have to limit what you ask them for, because that time is money, like literally in this sense. So what we have to do is that we have to think on ways to ask things to ChatGPT that will take less time of it to process. So for example, something that we discovered is that if you add a spreadsheet there that has more than one tab, it struggles a lot to process the spreadsheet, because it goes for the first tab as default, and you have to specifically direct it to access another tab. And that works for many other stuff. I can tell in the social part of our show and tell about images generation in DALL-E, but it's the same. If you add just one image, it's good. If you add two, it's crazy. It doesn't go that well. And the last one is that strategic input and active verification in AI-assisted tasks, while also acknowledging the AI limitations are, sorry, I cannot read what's there.
Are the key to making the most of ChatGPT.
Yeah, so I think that's a long way. We still have some lots to improve, but I think we learned a lot around how to ask things, and we did some interesting exercises, as Madhu said before, in trying different tones and checking and assuming roles, and how you can direct ChatGPT to better get what you want. But in summary, I think what we could see, we could experience directly, was that the more information you give and the more specific information you give, the best the results are. Madhu, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Matthias. So, well, while the task 1, the data extraction task, led us to all agree that there's a long way to go, we still went ahead and have a few learnings from the accuracy and completeness task as well on the data that we extracted. Obviously, there were some issues that we discovered in the beginning, which brought up concerns regarding the source of where the data was extracted. So if you just went ahead and asked ChatGPT to bring out information regarding a certain project from without mentioning the policy document or the source, it wouldn't tell you where it got that information from, at least in version 3.5. And that brought up questions around validity, credibility, and completeness, something that we are very much sensitive about. So this is something that we need to be very careful of. But also, that being said, the analysis was obviously informative and it obviously pinpoint critical gaps. So one other thing that we tried to do was to upload the spreadsheet, the Indigo spreadsheet, which has many tabs, and ask ChatGPT how many columns were missing or how many variables had missing information. And it kind of tried and summarized the number of columns and told us which of them were missing, not at 100% accuracy, but that could be something good to check on data completeness if we are looking at doing something like that. The other thing that we realized was that when we were extracting the descriptive information, like I said, the tone was fairly neutral, which meant that ChatGPT wasn't inducing any bias, at least not yet. But I fear that the policy documents that we gave were quite neutral. So maybe it's just a way of confounding it by providing neutral documents. I don't know. Maybe we might have to check with more documents and see if it generates, even then it generates neutral, quantitative or descriptive variable results. And obviously the fact that we could check the sentiment in itself is a good thing, because we as data officers, data analysts are still human. And when we input the descriptive variables, there is a possibility that we would unconsciously include some bias in those descriptions. If we provide that to ChatGPT and if it only takes a few minutes to tell us if the tone still is neutral, well, that's a good thing. So I think that was a bonus for us, which we did not see coming, but it was here. We might want to try this more, experiment with it, play around with it before making concrete decisions on how well or how much we want to use ChatGPT. But that's all about task 1 and task 2. I'm happy for any questions or
Thank
discussion.
you, Mario and Mateus. This was fun to see and hear from. I'll pass the microphone to you, Rob, for some comments.
Yes, thank you. Interesting. I think there are some things to explore around the choice of the large language model, and whether others might give you some advantages. So you're using essentially a large language model as a service, ChatGPT, and as I think one of the team mentioned, that meant that created some limitations in terms of the responsiveness. So an alternative is to take an open source large language model like Llama 2 or others. There are quite a few available now, and install those on your own systems. And then you should be relatively free of those performance limitations once you've done some basic work to complete the installation. I think one thing to also consider is if you are using, say, ChatGPT, when you show it documents like your spreadsheet, you're uploading that to the servers, and therefore you lose control over it in practice. And another advantage of taking a large language model, an open source one, and installing it on your own systems is that you no longer will be uploading data to some remote server, but you'll keep the data entirely confined to your own infrastructure. And so that's a second point I think to bear in mind. The third thing is, well, I'd be interested to hear more about the evaluation methodology you used. did you do it in a formal way, or is it based upon more subjective assessment of the behavior of ChatGPT in answer to your queries? If you're going to proceed with this, and I hope you will, because I think there's a lot that can be learned and a lot of benefits from exploring further what these large language models can do. I think having in place a methodology for evaluation you can repeat and will allow you to measure the degree of improvement that you observe as you try different large language models, then you'll know if you're heading in the right direction in terms of achieving your goals. So that's a few initial points. I don't know if there's got any reactions to those or anything you'd like me to talk about in more detail. I would just mention, of course, the problem of hallucinations, which people clearly view as being very significant because they are generative technologies. They will create very plausible answers, but ones which are not necessarily have any basis in the underlying data. And it's necessary to be very careful about trying to manage or even eliminate the hallucinations that might otherwise be generated. So that's some initial thoughts. I wonder if anybody wants to respond to those. I have
Thank
some
you,
other
Rob.
things I'd like to add, but let's take those points first, shall we?
I'll give Mateusz, Madhu like 1 minute to respond quickly because I want to give enough time to the other group to present, and then we'll pause to answer the questions and for general Q&A. Mateusz, Madhu?
Okay, I'll try to be really quick. Thanks, Rob. Thank you very much for the comments. They're very useful. I'd like to learn more about how could we use this approach of an open source model. We had different levels of expertise in our group. So if it's something that we could use even with non-technical people in programming, I think that would be really interesting. And about the assessment and evaluation, we didn't do any like really formal one. We just checked the data with what we had. That's it for me. Madhu, would you like to add on this?
Yeah, no, you've almost summed it up perfectly, Mateusz. I just want to say that the evaluation methodology was extremely subjective. The fact that we had so many people from different levels of expertise and also being aware of what they were, being aware of at least the subject matter helped us just get a more pooled understanding of how things worked for all of us. And then we would definitely be willing to go ahead and do a more formalized structure around this. Having said that, this is why we use ChatGPT, because we thought this could be a good starting point, which could accommodate people from different levels of expertise, but definitely keen on looking at the open source LLMs.
Okay.
Knowing more. Thank you.
One other thing I wanted to mention was, I think one of the issues that you encountered was that ChatGPT doesn't link its responses to the source, which means that there is, I think, a potential for a lack of trust in the outputs that it generates. And that's another reason why I think you would find it beneficial to look at open source models that you yourself have control over, and also because you can then have the prospect of making sure that the model is actually analyzing your data, that it's not affected by sources of data that are not relevant to the queries you have. You can make these open source models reflect entirely on the data that you provide, and they'll also then be able to link their responses to that data. So you'll have a much clearer understanding of the answers and what the source of the in the documents that you're analyzing, what the source in those documents actually are, and that gives you a way of checking whether the answer is credible or not. So I don't know whether it's worth mentioning what we're doing with the Go Lab at the moment. Shall we save it till the end?
I'll pause you here, and then maybe we'll come back because I want to give the floor to the second group, and I don't know who is taking the word for the second group. But we'll come back, Rob. Thanks.
Yeah.
Great, thank you, Mara. So I will start describing what we did in group 2, and then I will leave the floor to Petra. Group 2 was a subgroup in our Hack and Learn event, and what we were trying to do was to create and train a bot in ChatGPT to see if we can train a bot and actually ask questions to this bot. And the questions that we were asking were questions about the data that we would input in the impact bond data set. So this was another way of trying, can we use ChatGPT to complete our impact bond data set? If we go to the next slide, we will see basically what this challenge was about, and we label it the Auto Flow Fiesta because we wanted to make things more, to automate some of the things that we do before uploading data to the impact bond data set. In the next slide, we will see the process that we usually do if you have a ChatGPT paid account, you can create a bot or you can create a new GPT. This is what you need to do. It's very simple. They just ask for a name, a description, and some instructions for the bot, and then you can train the bot by uploading different knowledge sources. What we decided to do is to create a bot for one particular impact bond project and then ask some questions to this bot. In the next slide, you will see how we completed these instructions for the bot. We created the Peterborough Sieve bot, and this is a bot that is designed to answer questions about the first social impact bond in the UK. This is an impact bond that was launched in 2010, and it was aimed at reducing the reconviction rates of short sentence male prisoners leaving HMP Peterborough. And if you see the knowledge side, we uploaded several reports to this chatbot. We realized that it was easier to work with the older impact bonds rather than the new ones. If you go to the next slide, we will see why. We realized that the more reports and the more data that you can feed to these bots, the easier it is for ChatGPT to give the correct answers. When we were trying with the newer projects, the projects where you have very little data, well, you can only feed very little data to the bot and it doesn't work that well. So it was really good to work with the older projects. And this is the list of all the projects, all the resources that we uploaded to ChatGPT. We have a document on the backgrounds of the Sieve, some final reports. We also have some interim reports, some learning exercises. These are all publicly available documents that live on the UK government website. On the next slide, I just have a very short example. I basically asked the bot, can you please tell me how you were trained? And he told me that he or she was specifically trained to understand and provide information about the Peterborough Sieve, including details on the stakeholders, goals, outcomes, and any other relevant data findings from the evaluation or the reports. So basically, this is what we wanted to do. And then we ran a series of tests. These tests were not formal. They were just something that we wanted to do as a group to see how good the responses were and if we could trust ChatGPT to provide data to be uploaded for the impact bond data set. I'm going to leave the floor for Petra so she can tell some of the tests that we did. And I think we need to go to the next slide too.
Yeah, thank you, Juliana. Thank you so much, everyone. Nice to be here. Yeah, so I will talk a little bit more about what we did. I think it's important to mention at the very beginning that all of us sort of like trained our own bots. So there's potentially an initial, let's say, bias in that in terms of how we all trained our bots because we use different prompts. There are two ways of either creating the bot with the sort of like the configure functionality as well as with the sort of like instructions and just training it with just general instructions. So we did run similar queries and but we found that some particular information were very hard to get from the GPT, particularly related to the stakeholders involved. But I will talk through one of the tests which was done, which was basically checking the data accuracy using those sort of information which are on the website as a benchmark, whether we get the same quality of data. So for this, we try to understand whether it would have any, let's say, influence if the internet is turned on or not within the GPT, because there's a tick box when we are training the bot, whether we want it to have internet access or not. So whether it is better to train it with closed documents so that it only relies on those, or whether we can allow it to search the internet as well. So we had some initial assumptions in terms of that the quality of data information which we are getting will be the same. This we are unsure still, and I think somewhat very similarly to the first group, I think that we face somewhat the same problems in terms of how we are framing all prompts. And then the second one was that the second assumption was that even if the internet is turned on, it won't influence the outcomes. And then the third one was basically related to the prompts, that these need to be more tailored, which became true. So the testing was basically with 4 rounds. On the first round, while using the same prompts over the 4 rounds, the first round was without the internet turned on. So the bot was asked the prompts without internet access. Then the second one was with internet, but the bot was asked to focus only on the documents. And then the third one was with internet turned on when the bot was prompted to also look at the internet. And then the fourth round was without any prompt, initial prompt, where it could look at. Could I get the next slide, please? So some of the findings that the internet did not have any great impact on the results. If something, in some cases, it sort of made it more, how to say, more confusing. So when I was asked to particularly focus on both the documents as well as on the internet, it included the links from websites from where the information could be gathered. Also, sorry, I'm just checking my notes. Yeah, so it didn't pick up that many quality information, which I think we all thought that if it would have access to the internet and access to the Indigo page, it would pick up all of those information which was already there, but it didn't do that. So what might have had some sort of an influence on the answers which we got was based on the influence by the initial prompts of whether the bot is focused on the documents or whether it is needing to focus on both the internet and on the documents. Interestingly, when the bot was not prompted with anything, it gave more confident and precise answers. So in terms of where we got some good results, were basically around SDG relation of the project, service user target population. It managed to identify the commissioners and outcome payers, the intermediary organizations. What it was somewhat difficult was with the outcome metrics and the intervention description in terms of how good quality that is. And then particularly difficult with any financial data, as mentioned by the first group as well. This was hard for us to gather as well, but this could have been because we didn't feed it with any contract documents. where these information could have been. And then the precise start date and the contract signature were not picked up by this bot. And also the providers, the service providers and the investors were not picked up. And interestingly, when we did some trial asking specifically the bot with the name of the organization, like, can you identify YMCA in the documents, it said, yes, I can. And then we asked it why it couldn't. And it gave us the answer, which was, I think, mentioned by the first group as well, that it needed a more specific prompt for it to recognize that type of data, which is, again, linked to the time in which it searches for it. Yeah, thank you. Next slide. And then the second test was basically thinking whether if we are creating prompts with the GPT, so asking the GPT to write prompts for itself, feeding it with the information which we are expecting as an answer in relation to the question, then it would work. So it does work well with generating prompts for itself. Yet the second assumption, which was basically that this will match the quality of information on the website, still remains ambiguous. So what was asked for the GPT is to write 3 prompts, knowing the answer expected and the type of information which was needed. And also the bot was not allowed to use the words which were used in the answer. And then based on these generated prompts, we run these prompts with the bot and checking whether there's any accuracy. It provided various different findings. Could I get the next slide, please? So it doesn't provide short answers unless it is prompted. So the reality of asking it with all of these prompts, it didn't reduce sort of like the length of the answer. So it would need to be prompted to write in short, but then there's a question whether this information would be good quality. It's almost like when someone's writing an essay, what is what I'm keeping and what is the information which I can leave out. So as mentioned in the first group, there's still quite some hand-holding there. What was interesting, that it performed better than in the first test, using these prompts on the contract signature date, the start of the project date, and on outcome metrics. So picking up these. So whereas in the first test, we were not able to identify the months, in the second test, it identified. Again, good. There was a good performance on identifying the policy sector, the service users, target population, intervention description, the location information, commissioners, outcome payers, and intermediary organizations. But it, again, didn't perform well was on financial data, as well as the service providers and the investors. And also it did not perform well on identifying whether the program was completed, which was very interesting because in the first test, it identified that it was a completed project. Yes, so yeah, I think that's mostly from me.
Yeah, thank you,
Yeah,
Petra.
thank you.
I'm keen to get comments from Rob, so I'll jump in, throwing you in, Rob, with some comments.
Thank you. Very interesting indeed. Again, I would encourage you to adopt perhaps a more rigorous evaluation methodology, so that you can track what improvements you're able to achieve. I think that's going to be important if you're planning to continue experimentation with large language models, and I would certainly encourage you to do that. So I was intrigued in particular by the the work you've been doing to improve the prompts. This, of course, is an area of much research at the moment. And from what I understood from the brief summary there is that you used as prompt examples of what you consider to be good answers. Is that right? You mentioned about extracted by the human eye. So I assume that you looked at the document and for a particular query, you found some text that you thought answered it. And then you use that as your prompt. Is that right?
Yeah, so it was basically, I picked the answers from the website basically, and put it as sort of like a benchmark, or like what I wanted to get. And then also identified in relation to what, well, I don't really want to say type of information, but like, let's say, relation to the stage of development, the expected answer was completed.
Okay, so that's interesting. Of course, trying to create good prompts by that method is not likely to be scalable. It would mean that you'd have to, for any particular query that you would like to make on the document or on a data set of documents, you'd have to go through that process of extracting good answers and then using that as your prompts. Now, you can actually use the large language model itself to do what we call query expansion. So take your initial query, you put it into your large language model, and then you take the outputs and you use those as, if you like, a better query. You may get several sets of answers effectively, and being mindful of the token limits for the input, you might need then to summarize those answers to create a single piece of text, which you can then use as your prompt and rerun process again. Now that has the advantage, obviously, that you're relying on the large language model to do the query expansion, which you've hitherto been doing manually. So I think that's something that would certainly be worthwhile exploring. I'd return to the point I made before about whether you want to continue using ChatGPT or ChatGPT 3.5 or 4, as opposed to taking an open source one and integrating into your own infrastructure. I think probably if you want to continue with these experiments, that's probably worthwhile doing. If you're just doing it a one-off, then yes, there's not much motivation really for going that route. I mean, just use ChatGPT. But if you want to continue with this and you want to, for example, use documents that you may not want to share with the world, I mean, of course, I think with the Indigo data set, there may be some documents that are not public, for example, and therefore you wouldn't want to upload them to an external server. So that's something to bear in mind as a factor in making that kind of decision. But I think if you're going to continue experimenting, then I would advise certainly to try open source models. I mean, this allows you, because they don't all perform to the same degree of accuracy, and so you've got a chance there to see which ones might work better with your kind of data as well. It's really up to you, but that would be my suggestion. In terms of the actual deployment, it's not very technically demanding. I think it would be probably handy though if you had access to a data scientist who can do the installation and just advise on the tailoring adapting the model to work with your data. That would then put you in a position to go ahead and do your experiments. So that's some initial thoughts.
This sounds fantastic. I just want to say that, as we said at the beginning, it was a very mixed group in terms of expertise, and what we managed to do and experiment with. Like, I thought it was very impressive. Like, I don't want to carry us over time. Is there any burning question, please raise your hand, or I will shortly hand over to Shri to tell us what happens next. Okay, so as I said before, we will be staying online for some social and additional question, but some of you I know have commitment from the top of the hour, so we will let you go. I'll pass it over to Shri. For the social, we'll stay on the same link, so very easy to find. Just don't go away, but if you have to leave, please feel free to leave. So what's happening next, Shri?
Thank you, Mara. Thank you, everyone, for great presentations, and thank you, Rob. I certainly learned a lot from this challenge and from all the sharings. So a few next steps from me. So the first one is our Slack channels will remain open. So if you want to continue working on some aspects of the bot or some different parts of the challenge, feel free to use the Slack channels. And also, it's a great way to keep in touch with the team that you worked on as well. And next up, we'll be writing a report to capture all this amazing learnings and that were shared today, and also your reflections. So if you like to co-author the report with us, you can either just put in the chat that you'll be interested in co-authoring and we will be in touch with you later, or you can let us know in the Slack channels, or you can let the challenge leader know as well. And this is something Mara already mentioned. So we have a social event. So it's a very friendly place to hang out and chat. So we'll stay on the same link. So we shared some instruction on Slack channel before. So if you can, please bring something indigo, or you can wear something indigo. People get really creative with this as well. So we are looking forward to seeing what you'll be bringing or wearing. But if you don't have anything indigo, don't worry. You can still come and hang out with us as well. That's all from me. I'll pass it back to Mara.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Rob, for giving us your expert feedback and constructive suggestion on where to take this next, for instance, with this open source model and a thoughtful evaluation. And I want to thank all the Hack and Learn participants and the challenge proposer to take us to this crazy space. And thank you so much to Open Data Services that who have been there for us. For the social, stay online. It's kicking off in 1 minute, and maybe you don't know, but we are going to hand out a prize. Thank you.
Can I just say thanks for inviting me along today. It's been interesting to hear your experiments, and I say I do hope you'll continue with those, and I'd be interested to follow up with you at some point in the future and learn how you're progressing this. I think this is we'll see, I think, some really significant benefits in due course. It does require an investment in time now in order to get those benefits. But I think with a bit of refinement of the methodology and reviewing some of the experiments you've done, you'll be on course to really make some interesting progress. Unfortunately, I have to leave now for another meeting, but I wish you all the best of luck and look forward to talking with you again.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Rob.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.